Right, good afternoon, everyone. Those attending in person and on the screen. It's 3:30, and this is the Cabinet meeting. I can go to item 1 on the agenda, which is the minutes of the last meeting that have been previously circulated. Do members of Cabinet agree that they're a true record of that meeting?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies for absence. I've heard one apology from Councillor Blunt, who may be slightly late, but we're going to carry on going pending his arrival. Item 3 on the agenda is urgent business. I have none recorded. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Has anyone got any declarations of interest in relation to the matters before us today? No declarations of interest. Which brings me to item 5, which is Chair's correspondence. I've had no correspondence of note for this meeting. Which brings me on to item 6, which is members present under Standing Order 34. Graham.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yes, I have Councillor Morley on all items. Do wave if these aren't correct. Councillor Morley on all items. Got Councillor Joyce for items 10, 11, 12, 13 and 16. Thumbs up if that's right, Councillor Joyce?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Rives under item 10, although he's not present in the room and isn't available online at the moment. And I've got Councillor Dwally for 9, 10, 14 and 16, who's present in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome. And item 7 on the agenda, called in matters. I haven't had none report to me. Item 8 on the agenda is forward decisions. A copy of the forward decisions are attached with your papers for today. Which brings us on to item 9, matters referred to Cabinet from other bodies. We've got CPP and R&D with recommendations sent out to us, and no comments from E&C, although we have a section 34 from Councillor Dwally in relation to that. Right, so in relation to item 10, which is the first substantive item on our agenda, that is...
I do believe we've got Councillor Dwally would like to talk under item 9, as standing order.
Thank you. Yes, it was just that there was a second recommendation that went from Regeneration and Development with regard to a visioning or review of future, basically to form a subgroup to look at the transport strategy going forward to 2030, 2035. I was surprised it wasn't on the matters referred to Cabinet, and I was just wondering if this would be brought to the next Cabinet. Thank you.
I'll just ask Sam Winter for some clarification. I believe that's because it wasn't on the papers, was it?
Chair, if it was a recommendation from R&D that they set up their own subgroup to look at this, it wouldn't need to come to Cabinet. It's within R&D's powers to do so.
Thank you for that clarification, Sam.
Thank you. I got the impression that they were looking at maybe a Cabinet group, but it wasn't clear. But I was, because it was a recommendation that was declared by the Chair to go to the Cabinet. I just wanted to know what. Forgive me, I'm very tired. I just wanted to know what was happening with that.
I think the opportunity we have around this is that the recommendation that you're talking of isn't in relation to any of the papers in front of us as Cabinet today, so we've got time to actually look at that and come back at a later stage.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, which brings us on to the first substantive item, which is Parkway, which is pages 10 to 20 of our packs. And I believe that, David, you're going to introduce that paper to us.
Yes, this is an update report on the Parkway development. presenting the high-level financial viability assessment relating to the development on the Cower housing allocation site only. We're seeking Cabinet approval to enter into a contract with Lovell to develop approximately 228 homes. The exact number would be determined as we're going through the preparation process for the new planning application, following a viability assessment is set out in the report. There is one item under recommendation number 3 to approve the optional environmental enhancement of 1.71 million. It refers to section 7 of the report. It should actually refer to section 8 of the report on those environmental considerations. The scheme, as it stands now, is a viable development, should be making return to the council a capital return of above 5% based on the figures that we have at the moment, which is still some way short of what a commercial developer would deem as viable. Their benchmark would be in the region of 15%. But the report does confirm that all the design and development expenditure which has been incurred to date on the Parkway development is absorbed into the scheme, and the scheme is proposed for around 228 homes, would still be viable and still be deliverable.
Thank you. Have any Cabinet members got any questions? Thank you. Yeah. Good point. Right, those in the room or on the screen, section 34s, are there any comments they'd like to make regarding this paper?
I think we've got 4 for item 10, Leader. First one is Councillor Morley. Please invite you to comment on the papers.
No, I have no immediate comment, thank you.
Councillor Joyce.
No, I'm fine, thanks a lot.
Councillor Diwali.
No, thank you.
Councillor Rives, who's not here, we'll cross him off.
Okay, which brings us into Cabinet members. Has anyone got any questions of David or any comments on the paper in front of you? Okay, so if I can turn us to the recommendations that we're asked to do, which is on page 10. There's a number of recommendations there. I don't propose to read them all out. Are people happy to take those recommendations on block?
Agreed.
Agreed. Brings us on to item 11 on the agenda, which is members' inquiries inbox, which is page 21 to 29 of our pack. I believe, Debbie, you're going to present on this one.
We've got Honor on screen.
I do apologise. Honor, I can now see you on the screen. I'll put my glasses back on so I can see you up there. If you'd like to present, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. The report I've got in front of you today is in respect of the members' inquiries inbox. Members will recall that this was introduced about a year ago in August of last year to coordinate responses to member inquiries from officers and to try and free up senior officer time in responding to members' inquiries and to centralise the process so inquiries didn't get lost in individuals' inboxes. A change to the way that members' inquiries are dealt with is a change to the constitutional standing orders, and I've put that as an appendix to the report. What I've done there in table 1 is shown the volumes of inquiries that come into members' inquiries, and as per a request from some members, I am now keeping records of the time it is taking to respond to inquiries. prior to the report being written, I undertook some consultation with both members and officers to establish some feedback on how they believe the members' inquiries inbox had been received. And I've put the responses to that consultation into Appendix A. On the overall, it was very positive feedback, with a couple of members not actually wanting the service to continue, but overall it was quite favourable. So, like I say, I've put on there a copy of the amended member officer protocol. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has regarding the recommendation that the inbox continue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And there has been a recommendation from CPP in relation to this, which was particularly that the responses should be in line with the timescale set out in the member office protocol, and to put an escalation process in place that actually, if it wasn't done within that timescale, that it should be, the inquiry should be referred into the executive director or chief executive. So that's the recommendation of CPP. In terms of section 34s.
Yes, yeah, so invite some councillors to comment, please, under Standing Order 34. I've got Councillor Morley.
Oh, thank you. No, no real comment. I use the members' inquiry quite often, with one or two exceptions. It's a very good service. I just think for the paper, it would be interesting to know the percentage of members who actually used it, because the percentage of members who responded to the consultation was only 25%, which I think is pretty poor, really, for elected representatives of the citizens of West Norfolk, that they haven't made more of an effort to make some sort of contribution. I just leave that on record. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Joyce, please.
Yes, what I would say is I would support the CPP on the officer member protocol, and referring matters up to one of the executive directors. My experience of members' inquiries is mixed, and that doesn't actually reflect on the people who are operating members' inquiries, or the members' inquiries unit, whichever you wish to call it, because they have difficulty getting the information. I sought some information in May to respond to government consultation. That didn't come until towards the end of June, after the government consultation has finished. And I do know that members' inquiries did chase it on more than one occasion, but it just was not forthcoming. Also, I've asked about the health and safety risk assessment and who did it on the staff actually in the meeting room right this minute, not the individuals, but obviously the risk assessment. And that hasn't come back. There were other things that I've also done. But generally, I think the CPB got it right, but they've only gone as far as the officers. Now, if it goes on a policy matter to the councillors, you take your pick of who the councillor is, and that individual doesn't respond within a reasonable time, such as the officer member protocol of responding within 3 days, even if it's only, can you hold fire? I'm trying to get the information that you request, so there is actually some response, then surely that should come to the leader. And the CPP missed that one, because clearly, if a cabinet member, you pick who it is, doesn't respond within a reasonable time, then the leader's got to get it at the council anyway. Well, certainly from me, and I suspect from most other councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Joyce. Councillor Dewally, did you wish to speak on this one?
No, thank you.
No, thank you. And back to you, Lee, for Cabinet, please.
Thank you. So I can draw people's attention to the recommendation which is on page 21 of the packs in relation to this, but also for us to consider while we're doing that, the recommendation to us from CPP with the amendment in relation to the timescales and escalation if it's not within timescales. Has anyone got any questions of honour or any comments around those? Adrian, I've got you.
Thank you, Leader. I think this is a very good service. It channels questions down to one place, which can be handled rather than being scattered all over the place. So I think it's a very good thing, and I'm very pleased to see it carry on. I can understand that perhaps there was some time lapses in answering questions, but if we think back when this was first brought up, we was in the middle of a pandemic and everybody was all over the place, and it was very difficult to tie people down to get the answers. So I think this worked very, very well, and in general, and I think Honour and the officers did very well to service this as well. So this has my full support, and long may it continue.
Thank you. Brian.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Obviously, I was leader when this system was introduced, and as Adrian has said, it was at a time when if you emailed a direct member of staff about a query or a problem, it could well have been that that person had been seconded away to work on the COVID response. And so there was an absolute definitive reason for it. And I think it worked well. I think it shows a focus to members that their inquiries go to a point, and then a professional officer then determines out which member of staff may be best to either reply or they will reply directly. And I think on that basis, I think it's definitely worthy of adopting into the Constitution and running as a permanent addition to what we do.
Thank you. Good.
Yeah, thanks very much, Leader. Just to echo the sentiments made, I think it's been a very good scheme to have, and I think from the appendix on whichever page it was, but the sheer number 1,200, and I think that's based on the idea that I think members have been a little bit sort of cautious on the fact that officers have been busy. So I'd expect that number to be a lot more. And I think that number in itself echoes why, having a procedure like this in place to keep all of that together and working well is why we've got this scheme here in the first place. I think that the CPP recommendations is a fair one, and I'd like to put forward that we attach that to our cabinet recommendations. I think it's fair to have an escalation policy, but I think, for all councillors, I think that has to be used in the right way, and that, things like the pandemic, if answers are a little bit slow, then sometimes it's obvious as to why those answers are slow, so we wouldn't want councillors just to be jumping on that as a way of escalating these. Sometimes things do take a little bit longer, but I think it's fair that we add that recommendation into cabinet recommendations today. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Have I got any other comments from cabinet? And my own observations on this, it echoes exactly what's been said before. You have to look at policies in the context of when they were set up. And this was set up in the middle of a huge pandemic when officers were being pulled in lots of different directions that no one could expect, and doing phenomenal work for us. And appreciate there were some challenges with it because of that demand. But the reality is it has worked very well, and therefore it should continue. And as Graham echoed, I think it's absolutely right that if we have something that is a procedure for people having contact and communication, it's right that we have an escalation process if that goes on a bit. So I'm quite happy to set those from CPP. In relation, just to address Charles's comments regarding issues of councillor to councillor communication, I don't think that this policy was set up for councillor to councillor, it was councillor to officer. And there are plenty of opportunities for, if opposition councillors aren't getting the responses they need through leaders' meetings or through various committees or through direct contact with myself to escalate that. So I don't think we need to cover that off in this policy. So in terms of drawing this to a close, are we content as Cabinet to accept all the recommendations that this continues as per page 21 of our packs, with the amendments of the recommendations to CPP regarding the timescales and escalation?
Agree.
Thank you. That brings us on to item 12 on our agenda, which is the council meeting interim arrangements. Honor, I believe that's you again.
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to get my camera to come on. Thank you very much, Chair. The report in front of you this afternoon is to ask Cabinet to consider interim arrangements for council meetings during the COVID pandemic that is still ongoing at the moment. As members are aware, the legislation to allow hybrid meetings or online meetings to take place actually ended on the 6th of May of this year. And the requirement now is that decision makers are in the room and that the meetings cannot be held completely electronically. However, we are still very mindful that the pandemic is affecting people, and numbers, although have happily started to reduce down over the last week or so. When this report was actually written, numbers were of positive cases were doubling each week. The government did run some consultation on the future of hybrid meetings, and that consultation closed on the 15th of June of this year, and the council actually did make representations from an officer perspective, and I'm aware that many councillors actually responded to that consultation in their individual capacity as well. What we are asking Cabinet to consider is that until the end of September, when we will review the situation again, that we continue with hybrid meetings so that committee members, panel members at Cabinet and Council are all held in person, with members of those committees actually present. For Standing Order 34, they can either be present in the room or will attend via Zoom, and the officers would continue to present at the meetings via Zoom. This is to reduce the numbers of officers in the room at any time. It will also hopefully ensure that officers, should they need to self-isolate, of which many have had to self-isolate recently, they are still able to continue to attend the meetings virtually. So the meetings can continue with the officers present. So the recommendations there are for Cabinet to agree for the interim, the meetings in the interim period to continue as hybrid, subject to a further review at the end of September 2021. But I'm happy to take any questions on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Have we got any section 34s on this group?
Yes, invites to comment, please. Councillor Morley.
Thank you. The review is going to take place in less than 2 months, so I would trust that the proposal is not going to last too long. I'm a firm believer in the responsible officer who owns the recommendation that's made to whichever panel or Cabinet or Council is also in the room. I think it gives a much better reflection, much better interchange of, and helps the decision-making process. So I would hope that would come out at the end of September. I would also hope that return to work is greater than that which is implied in paragraph 2.3. I recognise some of the benefits that are highlighted in 2.3, but I also recognise the benefits of networking, being in work, and all of the associated synergies that go with that. So those are my comments for perhaps in advance of the review in September. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. Councillor Joyce, please.
Yes, I take a different angle to Councillor Morley. As I said previously, the health and safety of the staff, and indeed of what other councillors are in the room, to me takes paramount over whether or not it's good to network or not. If you want a network, there's a telephone, or you can go meet in the pub nowadays. You know, that's available. But the council has to take as its first priority the health and safety of all involved. And that will, of course, include members of the public as well, who like to attend. But to me, this is actually a superior system than everyone meeting in the room. For one thing, your acoustics in the town hall is not brilliant. That can be improved, of course, but it's still not as good as I can hear you brilliantly on Zoom, but I suspect those sitting at one end of the room can't hear the other. But the big crucial issue is that you can't overlook the financial impact. Part of the council's consultation that it sent to government didn't include the actual financial impact of what happened with the meetings. You have the meeting room, that's £75, £80 an hour, which could be hired out for someone else rather than you being there. There's also just the simple travelling allowances of officers and councillors. That was actually in excess of the equivalent of 2 full-time members of staff that was saved last year. So there are big benefits to it that come in various guises. So I understand, and I'll try and avoid being too political on the government. Let's just say they were negligent rather than anything else, overlooking the fact that they could have extended the legislation, which of course the House of Commons put it back to the Speaker, who did extend it, and put the council in the position that it's in. But as far as anything is concerned, you're probably making the best of a bad job at this present time. So I can't criticise it. And if me turning up from Zoom has to be far superior than me turning up sitting in the room, because that's going to cost money travelling. Okay, I don't actually charge travelling allowance. I don't actually claim that, but others do who come 20 or 30 miles. They've got little alternative, to be brutally honest, and you save the money. The council saves money. And at the end of the day, the council is sure money to spend on services, which is what it should be. So, yeah, I actually do support the interim arrangements, and what happens at the end of September, we'll just have to wait and see.
Thank you, Councillor Joyce. And Councillor Dawley, I didn't have you down for this one, is that correct? Or would you like to...
Thank you. Yes, Chair.
Yeah.
I support the hybrid arrangements. I don't think it's been mentioned, most notably because it allows the meetings to be recorded as they happen and streamed live. I think that's a very important aspect of our democracy, and it's very important for that to continue. What I do have difficulty still is with the audio in the room, and when it's safe to do so, it's very helpful to have the officers in the room rather than remotely. But those are my feelings. Thank you.
Thank you. That's yourself for Cabinet, Leader.
Yes, thank you. I'll open it up to Cabinet. Ron.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I think the technological problems and steps that we need to overcome to get the system to work better is in hand. Hopefully people would have noticed an improvement in the quality in here today. I was in the other day and we ran various tests, including with an audio engineer, and obviously we're also looking at the specification for what is needed in terms of better amplification. You do notice a real difference when people are presenting remotely if they're using a little microphone that's built inside their laptop or iPad compared to those that put on a headset with a proper microphone. And I think where people are routinely presenting to either committees or full council, etc., then the use of a headset or a separate microphone is an absolute must. If you consider the little tiny microphone that's inside an iPad, for instance, it's meant for person-to-person communication. It's not meant to be amplified to fill this room and the stone hall behind it. So technology is being looked at to make that better. And I definitely noticed it better in here today than previously when I was last here for planning, for instance. And hopefully that will help that issue, but it will also mean that going forward, as Councillor de Wally's made reference to, broadcast out onto YouTube as a platform will still be perfectly possible. Obviously, if we put out output, we want that to be as good in terms of quality as we can achieve without spending huge amounts of public money to achieve that. And that's obviously a balance that has to be struck. I think within the report, it does obviously mention the benefits that remote working has brought. I think it's also important to remember that over the period of the time, some people may have had 20, 30 remote meetings and might think that 20 or 30 remote meetings is perfectly acceptable. During the pandemic, I was probably hitting 20 or 30 back-to-back Zoom or Teams meetings every single week. And I can honestly say that the impact on my eyesight and my mental health, working from home, sometimes on my own, is not the panacea of all problems to have remote meetings. So the fact that we're able to be here and the regulations weren't extended, I think was a good thing. We need to get things back to normal. And within that new normal, the flexibility of having someone join us remotely is well worth having.
Thank you. Graham.
Yeah, thanks very much. My question is not really a question in terms of whether they should or should not. I'm just thinking about the wording on bullet point 3. Officers will attend meetings via Zoom to limit the number of people in the room at one time. A lot of time, I'm not having a comment whether officers should or shouldn't come to the meetings. That's a different debate. I'm just thinking about the way in which we've worded that and whether we should put something else in with that. Obviously, we're always going to have a member of Democratic Services in the room. That's officer, chief exec, or obviously Debbie Gates is here today in place of Lorraine. Obviously, David came to the cabinet meeting today to present item number 10. So if we're going to sort of keep things slightly open to include certain officers, maybe that might be pertaining to the job role that they have, or potentially if there's a small meeting like cabinet today where there isn't a lot of people here compared to say planning when that's going on, whether we put something in there to keep that option slightly open. I just think that the wording of that makes it sound like we're drawing a complete line under officers will attend meetings via Zoom. And if we are sticking to the bullet point, then obviously we need to make sure that all officers are attending by Zoom and not coming along because they're around the corner, maybe. Don't know if Honor would be able to sort of answer that.
Yes, absolutely. I will change the wording. If Cabinet wish, I can change the wording to reflect that. We are trying to limit the numbers of people in the room, but you are right. There are some meetings that are larger than others and have more people. I think planning was one that was certainly discussed at corporate performance panel, that they requested that the officer was in the room because of the sound quality issues. And obviously with planning, it's absolutely essential that you can hear everything that is being said. I think it is it's not a matter of choice. It could be a matter of necessity. I would normally have come into the meeting today because I have several items, but I'm recovering from COVID, so it is better that I stay at home. And in circumstances such as that, I think it is wise that officers do join remotely. However, if they wish to be in the room and feel that their presentation would be more effective whilst they're in the room, then they should be able to do that as well. It is really just to limit the numbers, but also to give the flexibility should that be required. Thank you.
Thank you, Honor. Thank you, Graham. Anyone else?
Just really briefly, when you think of a planning meeting, there's normally 20 people in this room as a minimum. Today we've got 10. What difference would it have been if there'd have been 20 people on planners in here? Yes, well, you probably then want to limit the number of officers who attend in person. But today we could get 10 officers in here and still not have the same number of people. And I know it's about risk mitigation and actually what works sort of better for people. But I think there needs to be a physical assessment done to ascertain what is the safe number for the room, bearing in mind the ventilation that we have in this room, and then obviously we need to adjust numbers accordingly.
Thank you. Looking around the room, no other comments from Cabinet colleagues. My opinion on this is that sometimes you need to make a decision now because of the information you have and the situation that you're presented with, and other times it's better to actually pause and see how things develop. And I think we're in that space at the moment. If you look at the infection rates, thankfully we've got a low level of hospitalisations because of the wonderful work done around the vaccination programme, but you still have a number of people that are being having the dreaded ping or having to isolate. So it's absolutely right at this moment in time that we actually keep the arrangements that we've had. And I think September is about the appropriate time when we can see and reflect and change in a more considered way. So I would support this paper. I also note the comments from the committees that put forward that they also support us doing this, albeit, as mentioned by Brian, there have been some concerns regarding the IT equipment and sound quality, which is now being worked on. So I think that's the direction of travel with this that I would recommend. In terms of what's come up from Graham and been answered by Honor, in terms of the recommendation, if we keep them as they are, I would suggest that what might work would be the third bullet point down. Officers may attend meeting rather than will attend meetings via Zoom to limit the number of the people in the room at one time. And that would be a conversation between the committee chair of that meeting and the officers if it's around risk assessments and safety. Are people happy that meets the need? So apart from that one minor change, are we happy to accept that paper en bloc? Agreed. Thank you. That brings us to item 13 on the agenda, which is appointment of a monitoring officer to the Borough Council. And that's Honor again. And I do apologise, Honor. You've just told us you're recovering and we're hitting you with everything this afternoon, so I do apologise.
No, that's fine, Chair. Thank you very much. The report in front of you this afternoon makes the recommendation that the council moves to employ a full-time council's monitoring officer, as opposed to the position that we are in now with a part-time monitoring officer, which it comes under the service level agreement that we have in place with Eastlaw, our legal services provider. The workload of the monitoring officer has increased exponentially over the past 18 months. The workload is not expected to reduce. in the short to medium term. And what we are finding at the moment, that the workload that the monitoring officer has and the time that they have allocated within our service level agreement is not sufficient at the moment to meet our needs. We are a large organisation. We have many complex projects that require input from legal. It requires legal advice. And it requires a certain amount of due diligence to ensure all of our statutory obligations are adhered to. A further review of the legal services is being undertaken at the moment, and that as a whole will come back to Cabinet sometime in the autumn. But at the moment, it has been recognised that we as an organisation, we do need our own monitoring officer. And so the recommendation to Cabinet is that we move to recruit a dedicated monitoring officer who would be employed by the Borough Council. That's it overall, Chair. And again, I'm happy to take any questions on this.
Section 34 screen.
Yeah, thank you, Honour. Yeah, Standing Order 34, I'd like to comment, please. Councillor Morley.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yes, I trust you will all fully support this. It's been sorely needed. I have an outstanding question of the monitoring officer concerning governance under my remit under audit of their activities and their obligations under our constitution, which is yet to be answered. And I think if we had a full-time monitoring officer, it would make questions and answers such as these much more readily available to the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Joyce, please.
Yes, apologies for being a bit slow. Yes, I also think it's right to have your own in-house monitoring officer. I mean, that's actually what the law says it should be. I do understand there is a difference between lawyers on what it should be, whether it's the 1972 Local Government Act or whether it's the 1989 Local Government and Housing Act. It's the second one, which actually mentions the monitoring officer specifically to be an officer of the local authority. So yes, the council is right to have its own monitoring officer full-time. There has been increasing work on the present monitoring officer, but there's also the cost implications. And is it right that the monitoring officer also covers the parish councils? Because I'm not aware of any remuneration from the parish council to the monitoring officer for the work he or she does. And you then have to ask the question, is it right for one set of residents in one parish to be paying for petty arguing in another parish amongst the councillors who are referred almost, and quite often it is very petty that they're referred to. I understand the borough council, borough councillors can be petty. There's no alternative but to have the monitoring officer investigate that. But it's not only, the code of conduct, whoever is distinguishing it and using it, it's also keeping the council, this council, on the right path, keeping it legal. And I hear what Councillor Morley says. I've had several disagreements with the present monitoring officer, but I have no problem with her. I actually think she's very good because she has picked up the council where it has
Councillor Joyce, can we just refrain from talking about individuals of this, please? Sorry.
Well, I have
what you're saying, though. Thank you.
I have to say, I can't get away from it, but the present monitoring officer has picked the council up where it was not acting lawfully, and previous didn't. So, I'll leave it at that. But I support the idea of the council having its own monitoring officer. But you do need to have a very careful look at the costs, because you've gone from half a day to 2 days. Now you're going full time, and as Honour has said, there is the issue of the service level agreement with East Law that also needs to be looked at as well, because that's where the monitoring officer role is at present. But yeah, that's it as far as I can go.
Thank you, Councillor Joyce. Councillor Diwali.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I also approve very heartily this move to bring the monitoring officer in-house, although there are 3 words I would like to say. One is to ensure there is a balance between independence and oversight, and to ensure that if someone, the monitoring officer has enough support in their post as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to Cabinet.
Thank you, colleagues. Ron.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I think it's actually a great shame that we've had to move from a situation of a part-time monitoring officer to a full-time monitoring officer because of the workload of the monitoring officer. And that's, I think, a very sad reflection on not just the borough councillors, because there are only 55 of us now where there previously were 62, but it's a reflection of the workload that's brought in from all the parish councils. And I think Councillor Joyce made a very valid point. It's not particularly about this report, but I think going forward, there needs to be some form of formal arrangement that parishes can choose to buy into. And if they want the advice and service of a monitoring officer, then it is available, but it's available to them as a precepting authority. They're responsible for their own standards. And on that basis, you know, they need a facility that they can buy into. Now, obviously, with only a part-time monitoring officer, there isn't much capacity to buy in for those other bodies. And so I think this will add to that problem. But I would just much prefer that everybody behaved themselves, stuck to the Constitution, and didn't bother the monitoring officer at all.
Thank you. Adrian.
Thank you, Leader. I think times change. I think when we had the last shared arrangement, it worked. It was right at the time, and it worked very well. As Brian, as Councillor Long has said, things have changed, and we need to change with it. And therefore, this is the way to go. So I fully support that, and I look forward to seeing he or she in their post and doing a good job with support from everybody around them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from Cabinet colleagues? And just an observation from me around this one as well is that I think we all know the case is made for this. We've had the recommendation up from CPP supporting it, and in fact we've had a number of councillors in the room under Section 34 also supporting this, as well as colleagues from Cabinet supporting this. I take on board what's been said around we need to look at when we have this person in post, how we can move things forward after that. But the reality is that we are in a position at the moment where we haven't got the capability that we need at this moment in time, which means that we're reactive and slow reactive rather than being able to do proactive things with the monitoring officer to manage the type of issues that they currently have to. So that's the reason why I think it's important that we look at this now as we are doing. So if I can bring people to the recommendations around this, are people content with the recommendation? Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Which brings us on to item 14 on the agenda, which is the Councillor Community Grant Scheme. That's Honor again. Honor, over to you.
You'll be very pleased to know this is my last report on the agenda this afternoon, Chair. Yes, the proposed Councillor Community Grant Scheme it's an initiative to assist members within their own constituency to award funding to community projects that will deliver better outcomes for residents in their ward, as well as contributing to the overall objectives of the Borough Council as well. The proposal is that each councillor would be given a budget of £1,000, and that budget would be distributed according to the policy that I've put a very draft policy as an appendix, amongst unconstituted groups within the borough. This has come very much from the work that has gone on in communities throughout the COVID pandemic. Many communities have pulled together and worked very hard for the people within their communities to help them. They've delivered food, they've picked up medicines, they've run clubs, but a lot of these small unofficial groups are not able to access funding as a constituted group would be able to. So what we are looking to do is to introduce a scheme whereby the group could apply to the ward member for funding for a particular piece of equipment or a particular initiative, and the application will go to that member to make the decision and to decide whether that grant should be paid. This is very similar to grant schemes that are already in place within, and those who are also county councillors will be very familiar with this. The finer details have yet to be worked out. It is hoped to launch the scheme on or around the 1st of October, and the leader has committed the full budget would be available for the year 2021-22 should it be agreed. I would just point out on 1.5, that's a type an error there. It should read 55,000. There are 55 councillors. So I think I had amended that, but it doesn't look like it's been reflected in what's in front of you. So please accept my apologies for that. So as I've said, the actual scheme itself, how it will work and how the funds would be distributed are still to be worked out, but this is for a decision in principle that we would, that members are happy to introduce such a scheme for the good of the constituents in their areas. For areas that have more than one councillor, we would obviously need to work out the details on that and as to how that would work. But there are many of these schemes in existence at the moment, so other people must have this issue as well. But that's it overall, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. On section 34.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome comments from Councillor Morley, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Honor. I just want to highlight what was mentioned at CPP, whereas the maximum exposure on this is only £55,000, but there is a potential for a larger impact from reputational damage. So two things. One is we don't need a large bureaucracy to do the 55,000 within the offices, but members will have a governance obligation, which I think probably needs highlighting when this is introduced, and so that is recognised. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. Councillor Joyce, please. Do you not want to talk on this one?
It's a very reasonable scheme. Yes, there will be details that have to be worked out, but no, I just think it's a good scheme. It's certainly worth a try. And whatever issues arise will have to be dealt with. Hopefully, there isn't a massive bureaucracy that it does take, but that part, it just looks to be a good scheme and certainly a good start.
Thank you, Councillor Joyce. Councillor De Wally, please.
Thank you. My only concern with the scheme is where there may be conflicts of interest. So, for example, I'm on parish councils and involved with community groups, and I wouldn't want to be seen to be favouring or disfavouring. But if I'm involved, how would I resolve conflict of interest? That's my only question, really, of this scheme. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, round to Cabinet. If I start with AD and then Brian.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I think it's a good idea. There's a lot of small groups which would be most grateful for a little bit of funding. Just one question on obviously the finer detail. Will this be coming back to Cabinet to be ratified, or will there be an officer with yourself to come up to agree the final thing and then go to full council? How would the final setup be ratified, so to speak?
Yeah, I think for speed, given how we're going to be implementing this delegated decision by myself and officers, but then into full council, but obviously with Cabinet input, I'll share it with you. Yeah, so that can be added. Brian.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm really pleased to see this report coming forward. Sort of seedling for this, I did with my Deputy Leader put forward to the Chief Executive literally a week or two prior to the Council AGM. So it's really great to see this coming forward. I think it will make a real difference to people within their wards. I think the ability for councillors to be able to support schemes, and I do understand perhaps where people are coming from when they say, worried about conflicts with being involved in various different bodies and organisations. I think ultimately people will be judged by their electorate, and if they make payments to things that others would find not acceptable, then they'll be judged at election time for what they've done and where that money has gone. It is public money, it does need to be accounted for, and I do notice in the section 5, the financial implications, it does say a budget from 4 question marks and activities, 4 question marks, has been allocated to the scheme. Now, I understood that there was underspend within the last financial year's budget, and on that basis, I would think that would be a starting point for an emergency sort of allocation, because it was an underspend. But it would be important to know where that budget is coming from in the future going forward. £55,000 very roughly is 1% of council tax, and so to spend 1% of the borough council tax across all of the wards, I think is going to mean that there is investment from the borough council in some of the villages that probably don't see particular direct investment from us, and I think that there's real advantage to that. And so to make it sustainable going forward, we need to allocate money to it within our budgetary process, obviously going on, which I'm sure we will do.
Yeah, just in terms of 5.1, the financial implications, we all were sent amended report and appendix on the Cabinet with the Cabinet papers. So it is in there, but I'll read it out just so that you're aware. So a grant of 1,000 for all councillors will give a maximum annual cost of 55,000. This is being funded from an understanding of financial assistance grants. And I do believe, Leader, you've already been looking at how we allocate this in future years as well. So that's in the amended bit.
Yeah, thank you, Graham. Angie.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Long has stolen my thunder because I was going to make the same point as he has. But I would like to point out that it's not just the parishes or villages that will benefit, it's also the towns. We have quite a few councillors who represent wards in the town. So the benefit will be across the borough, not just in the parishes and villages. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham.
Yeah, just to quick question. I hope it's not the case. I hope it all gets spent. But if we do have councillors who don't, for whatever reason, choose to spend their money, are we just putting that back in the pot, or will we look at doing anything else with any underspend at the end of the financial year? And also, as I know from the highways pot that county councillors get, will there be the opportunity for this to be carried forward into other years if you are awaiting something to happen before that money can be allocated to somebody's account for whatever it might be? If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that in the paper going forward.
Oh my God.
If you'd like to.
In case we've lost on with the technology, I think the intention is that it could be rolled over, and it's one of those points of detail that's going to be looked at clearly, rolled over to the point of at the end of an administration, we'll have to consider what happens with elections and new administrations. But within the administration, certainly, that was the intention. We've got one about.
Thank you very much. Councillor Blunt.
Richard.
Well, I love the scheme, it's a great idea. Will there be any guidance notes being sent to the members, and perhaps some sort of that we can issue to organisations or parish councils? So I think we do need a little bit of help to get this moving.
If I take that question, Chair, the idea is that we would conduct some training sessions for members in respect of distributing the funds, and we would also produce some marketing material around this for members of the public who are considering making the application. So yes, in answer to those questions, there will be guidance notes for members and certainly for members of the public as well. Thank you.
Just one question just on that. I understand some of this might be written up in the detail, but when we say marketing out to members of the public so that they can make an application, I'm just fairly cautious that we don't open councillors out to an absolute bombardment of 1,000 people all emailing you every 5 minutes saying, can I have some of your money, please, because we need X, Y, and Z. So I think we've just got, I know that'll be worked up in the detail, but I think my only comment is that we've just got to be cautious about how far that's pushed in some ways. We want it to be pushed enough so obviously people know about it, but I think the question will be is whether we're giving the £1,000 for councillors to use their own community knowledge in allocating that money out, or whether we go and launch this all over social media and every body who runs an organisation, especially following COVID, because, you know, some organisations are a bit strapped for cash, so we don't end up with our members' inboxes being full. And then the problem you've then got is if you've got 20 worthy causes, somebody's got to pick one of them, or the councillor's got to pick one of them, which could have a detrimental effect on upsetting 19 organisations, because it'll always be, why have you picked that one? So I just think we need to err on the side of caution with how we choose to market it, I think, if everyone agrees with that.
Chair, if I may respond, absolutely agree. We have written up that it would be a minimum spend of £100. That is to be confirmed, because whether that has been set too high or we would need to discuss that. The idea is to, and as you rightly point out, it could lead to a lot of paperwork. We don't want that. We want it to be as resource-less as possible and fairly straightforward to administer, because otherwise it could become a cottage industry in itself. But yes, I agree, you are right, it could do, and what you've also said is right, is as much as that members should use their local knowledge of their areas when they're making the decisions as to whether organisations would be able to receive the grant. We would also want to ensure that any kind of material that is produced in relation to this does also acknowledge that the funding has come from the Borough Council as well. So it would work both ways. But yes, I certainly agree, and we would have to market it very carefully to ensure that what you've said doesn't happen. I agree with that. Thank you.
Hang on, Sam.
I think Honors kind of said what I think. We could market it in such a way that we've told the members of the public that we've got this scheme going, but leave it to the individual councillors for their wards and parishes to then contact parish councils and the groups within their ward to tell them of the funding and how much we've got. So it might be that there's only a small pot of money you receive, or so we could market in our own way rather than push it out there on social media and have hundreds of people contact us as well. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, thank you. Well, no other hands up. Just my view about this scheme is that it actually meets two areas for us as a council at this moment in time. The first one is that we've all seen in our communities over the last 16 months, 17 months of COVID, some wonderful schemes that have emerged, almost grassroots schemes that have actually really helped people in need, helped communities and delivered. And it's absolutely right that we as a council try nurturing those so that they continue and thrive going forward. So that's on one side. On the other side of this, there is a realisation and expectation from us that councillors are the people that know their individual parishes, their individual bits of the town best, and they know these schemes best. And for some time, councillors have often said that the money's being spent in the wrong place, or not at all on their patch. And it's absolutely right, this gives us an opportunity as councillors of actually doing something about that, which is why it's important that we do this now. In terms of the conversations I've had with Honor and officers around this, in the devil in the detail, reassure Cabinet colleagues, there are opportunities around this. For example, if there are two councillors representing a parish or a part of the town, then they actually get £1,000 each. So that's £2,000, and they can combine if necessary. Also adjoining wards. And also, those of us that are county councillors as well know that similar scheme that operates there, these can often act as lightning rods to encourage more money in. So for example, you can actually say, I'm putting this money forward, and ask the parish to do similar, which then increase the money in the pot, which supports schemes on the borough. So we need to be absolutely right. Yes, we do need to get the safeguards around this right in the payment that's coming forward. But at the same time, we need to have the flexibility there, because this scheme is designed to be flexible to meet the needs of the parishes. So it's important we do that. And I've seen many examples of schemes on the parish that I represent, and the ones that I visited as the leader, that this little amount of money will be used to do an awful lot of good. So that's my comments around the paper. But the recommendations are in front of people on page 46, with one addition that's come from the conversation with AD here, that we make the recommendation as well, that will be a delegated decision by myself to bring it forward with officers to full council. Are people in agreement with that?
Agreed.
Thank you. Which brings us on to item 15, which is exclusion of the press and the public.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. So yes, the Cabinet is asked to consider excluding the public from the meeting under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 for consideration of the items below, on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 1 of Part A of Schedule 12A to the Act. and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Thank you. Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, just bear with me,